Hello, Internet. So back with a form review of an intermediate player who's doing a great job with a couple of little things to clean up. So this is Amber. I am not certain, but I believe Amber has a background in other sports because she's got very good balance, very good movement. So what this video is my humble little attempt to grow the sport in the way that is the most meaningful and important to me, which is to make sure that female players are feeling welcome in this sport and encouraged to play however they want to and empowered to do so and to do so as well or hopefully better than their male counterparts. So this is my humble attempt at that, of making sure that I'm doing my little part to be an ally and make sure that everyone feels welcome in our sport. And Amber was gracious enough to allow me to try to rip apart her form and help out a little bit. And of course, she will get final right of refusal if she wants this actually posted on the channel or not. So to be decided. All right, so let's jump in. So just play it because I forget to do that and people tell me it's rude. So just context of what Amber's throw is looking like right now. She said she's throwing drivers 300 to 315 consistently. That is solid. So really good intent. Looking at the target until the reach back. Really good balance. Good pocket. Like pocket could be deeper, but I'm not concerned about that. It is totally in a good spot. Okay, so one more time and then we'll get a little more critical. Well, half another time and then we'll get more critical. So in the process of talking with Amber about this this clip, we noticed the front foot. Look at the front foot. Releases a little bit, but not quite enough, and kind of gets a little bit hung up on the grass, right? So that's a knee safety issue. And Amber actually got a little bit of a muscle. You said it was a muscle sprain, you think? Knee got a little grumpy from either this throw or throws like this. So that's kind of the first thing to address. Always safety first, right? If it hurts, stop in all things. So what's happening is the plant foot isn't getting established on the heel enough. So here, this is shifting from behind you, right? If you do the whole sea bass thing, where you want your right glute facing towards the target. So this is a good position. There's a thing in the X step that we'll talk about next. But look at the front leg as a whole here, and then as we clicky pawsy forward, you see how the front hip went back to neutral, where we're seeing both hips again instead of just the side of the right hip. So this whole front leg assembly is opening up as it gets to the ground. So we end up here with the toe forward. I don't like that color. I like this color. So we end up with the toe a little bit forward, right? Kind of just visual assumption. I'm assuming that's 90 degrees. And so we have the back foot toes back a little bit and the front foot toes forward a little bit. Sea bass would call this immovable horse stance. I would call it a short leg, long leg problem. So the front leg is, well, this is an equilateral triangle. Both legs are the same length. But we want, in my method, we want the rear leg shorter. So that's a little bit of an issue. It's coming from the X step. We can clean it up pretty quick. But let's flip over to demo mode and show what we would want to see a little bit more of. So we're getting to this type of position. And here your hips can't really move a lot. Like Amber, you're doing a subtle version of it. Like I've seen people like way worse, right? And that just makes the hip mobility worse. So with the toes out, your hips can't really, this one can't go anywhere. The leg has to come back in for it to work, right? So where we really want to end up is with the rear foot on 90, or at least inside of 45, and then the front foot on 90, or even turned back to a 45. So the way my hips are built, I am very comfortable being knee in or toe in or both. So I like to keep this rear foot 90 degrees. That's a good place to cue. So try to get here. And when you're trying that, you will at least hopefully get to here, and that'll be fine. So your rear foot isn't really a problem, but getting it in tighter would help. But then the front foot, we really do want the front foot to be here, at least while you're learning this style of bracing. So you're kind of going to overcompensate and go to a heel forward position while you're at least figuring out the knee safety issue. So what we want for the knee safety thing is we're going to turn your front foot into a rocking chair, right? So you're going to set down on the toe, and then you're going to rock to the heel, but you're not just going to rock to the heel and then stop. You're going to rock to the heel and then rock up onto the heel. So this is what Jonathan was talking about in his video of how to fix this issue. So go check that one out. It's pretty good watch. But this method is going to accomplish the same thing. So I would do both and double up and make sure that you get it fixed, right? So what happens in your throw is you get here, some of the twist happens, you release a little bit, but then not all the way, and you end up kind of stepping over before your foot has released. So to build that release in, right, we don't want it to be a conscious thing. We don't want it to be that you get here and you're turning and you say, oh, okay, I feel a little bit of tension on my knee ligament. I'm going to pick my toe up now and release it. Like, no, it's not a conscious thing. It's not even a subconscious thing that just happens automatically. We want it to be a physical thing that happens automatically. So as the way I'm setting my weight into my front foot is I'm going toe and then heel, and I'm going to go to the heel hard enough that the toe rocks up on its own. So I do want there to be an instant where both the ball of my foot and the heel of my foot are down. That's where the majority of my hip rotation will happen, behind my brace, ideally. But then there will be an automated point where when my hips lock up here and can't go anymore, the toe will be de-weighted enough that it goes forward on its own 100% of the time, guaranteed. It doesn't matter if I have soccer cleats on and I'm on foot-thick grass. It should still go, right? So that's what we want for knee safety. So let's get that done first and then progress into worrying about the other parts of the throw, right? So this is probably best done from one steps without a disc, right? So you're just going to stand here. You're going to step forward, put your toe down. Not worried about how you're coiling into your rear hip much right now. Just worried about the front leg releasing. So you're going to go toe down, heel down, and then spin on your foot. And this is basically Jonathan's thing, right? So just make sure that you're going to spin on your heel. So it shouldn't ever be where you have any desire or ability to step forward before your toe releases. So toe, heel, spin. Toe, heel, spin, right? So once that's dialed in, then we can jump into the rest of the form work. So we'll flip back to Amber here. Okay, so that much said, let's go back to the beginning and look at where this problem starts, right? So it's because it always starts earlier than we think. So first step, just a momentum step, totally groovy. Second step, this is the initial step. That's pretty long. It's not wrong, it's not bad, but this step is going to start to define how much momentum we have going into our walk-up. So when players are learning how to brace well, having too much momentum in your walk-up is the enemy. So the slower you can do your walk-up, or honestly, if you can just stick to standstills, I know that's hard to do, that is the quickest way to progress towards learning the feel of a very solid brace, right? So if you keep too much speed in your walk-up, you will never learn how to brace correctly because you're just going to overpower your brace all the time. And it's super, super, super common. Like, people play for 10, 20 years before they realize they should slow down their walk-up. So that is the best advice I can give to beginner and intermediate players, is just slow down your walk up and focus on learning your brace. And that starts with this initial step being smaller. So I would cut this about in half while we're learning front leg brace stuff. So because that step was too long, this step is too long. Very athletic, very balanced. I like it. There's not a lot of forwards or backwards lean in the X step. Yeah, it's really, really good balance. But let's just make it smaller. So you're getting airborne, and it's like a 1.5 2 foot step. So cut that in half. Make it limited to a foot, right? So when the X step is too big, let's go back. So the camera's moving, so this is going to be a little wonky, but this foot is a little tiny bit toes back. It doesn't need to be, but it's actually slipping before it leaves the ground. And then this one is setting down on a 45, but then it's turning to more than a 45. Yeah, so okay, so maybe your back foot is kind of a problem. It's a little too far back. And then here we have a long leg, short leg problem, because your rear leg is longer than your front leg, and I'm exaggerating that by cheating with my lines a little bit just to make the point come across visually. So we want this conceptually to be flipped. So we want your front leg to be the longer one, such that this angle with the ground is more acute, more pointy. And then we would want the rear leg to be more under your center of gravity, like how you kept both your legs in your X step, right? So we would want the knee to be tucked in a little bit and the foot to be here in a more neutral position. So then we have a long leg in the front and a short leg in the back, and it's easier to contain your momentum because of the angle of your front leg to the ground. Right, so that's a lot of stuff. So let's flip back to demo mode and go over all of that. So length of step is the first thing. Slow down the momentum in the walk up in order to balance brace output with momentum, right? So currently we have too much momentum, not enough brace output, so there's some spill past the brace that ideally we wouldn't want. So it starts with a nice controlled initial step, right? So not a big one, because now I have too much momentum and everything's going to tip forward. So nice, slow, controlled, and then make your X step. Like while you're practicing this, make your X step actually right here. Make it only 6 inches, and make sure your toes are pointed the same direction towards the camera in this case when you're filming from the side. So a nice small initial step, a tiny X step, and then your initial or your plant step landing with the toes further back than the heel, right? So I'm exaggerating a little bit, but when I throw these days, I try to do this, because me trying to do this means maybe I'll get that, right? So I'm overcorrecting because I know I have a tendency to, no matter how much I coil up and try to go backwards, my body is going to want to and do that, right? So you're overcompensating to get your body in the right position. So that's the first set of changes, is just smaller steps, less speed. This is almost impossible to do. I spent literally months going to the field every day and trying to fix this and not being able to fix it. I finally got so mad that I was like, okay, I'm gonna figure it out today. And I just filmed every shot that I did until I had made enough of a change that I started to get it at all. It took a very long time. So the best way that I have now to actually get that foot closed is just start from standstills. So stand square, take a step out to the side, shoulder width and a half, take a step forward. So now I'm here, take a step forward where you're adding half of foot length. So this would be no foot lengths, and then half a foot length would be here. So you want at least half of one of your feet as an offset from your front to your back, right? So you're here, toes are still parallel, then you're going to take your front toe and turn it backwards on a 45-degree angle. So from the side, 1, shoulder width and a half a foot of gap, and then turn this foot back on a 45. So this is your new home base. So for you, looking at your still of your throw, you have an offset, but it's like this much. So we're going to exaggerate that for now. This will autocorrect once you get your brace down, and you'll find what is comfortable and works for you. But while we're learning the brace, I want to increase that a little bit. And then you're like 3 feet wide. So I want to cut that back to like 2.5. So just a little more contained, a little more controlled while we're learning this new brace mechanic. Then once you get it, go crazy, do your own thing. So from here, all we're doing is kind of reconceptualizing how you're going to coil into your rear leg to make you avoid, I'm looking at your still again, make you avoid this type of a position where this leg is longer than this leg, right? So we want it the opposite, where this knee has more bend, this hip has more coil, and you're getting this front foot really out in front so that the angle to the ground is more aggressive, more acute, so that you can stop the weight here. It's not going to look like that in your full throw, but that's what you want to be able to do. That's a good way to check that your leg is in a decent orientation. So, coiling into the rear hip, but first. So not even worrying about the coil. Just get into this shape, shift your weight back, and shift your weight forward. So I'm shifting my weight forward in a very specific way. So I am not shifting my weight, well, I am shifting my weight over my back foot, but then I'm not shifting my weight over my front foot. This is very common. You're not bad on this front. It's a side view, so I can't really tell, but you look pretty centered. So this should not be a hard change for you, if a change at all. So my weight can go over my rear foot, that's fine, but I don't want it to go over my front foot. Where I do want it to go is on a third rail in the center, right? So my hips are going from here to there, to right on the stick. So I'm going from back to forward. This keeps my center of gravity, at least the center of gravity of my hips. My shoulders might be doing something else. It keeps my hips moving towards the target and moving behind my front heel. So wrong is here, right? Because that's going to make my rear leg move towards my center of gravity into my standing leg. That doesn't work, right? What we want is the hips to shift forward laterally so that the rear leg drifts behind the brace. Look at players that have a really solid brace. Drew Gibson, Albert Tom, Tristan Tanner. There's tons of other ones, but they all get this motion where the rear leg goes here and then their follow through happens and they spin around. Beginner and intermediate players skip that balance here and their leg just lifts up, comes straight towards the front leg, and then immediately comes around. So that's a very subtle version of spinning out around your brace, which means you're not balanced right to left in your brace yet. Let's see. So maybe I should look at a back view of your throw, but let's look at this, what we have, and see what your rear leg is doing. So I'll back you up a little bit. So we're looking as the rear leg de-weights. Yeah, so it stays pretty neutral. It's coming up, it's turning, everting, internally rotating, and then it comes around. So like I said, like you have pretty good balance. It hangs in that neutral spot for a decent amount of time, but we actually want that neutral spot to be not neutral and for your rear leg to go to the right first. So again, for clarity from the back, so I'm throwing into the wall now. We would want to see, what we're seeing from you is this leg rotates and then comes up and immediately goes around. Not immediately, it hangs out there for an instant and then comes around. And we would want to see a hip shift go targetward such that the leg goes here first and then comes around. That'll make your brace way more sticky. It'll give your brace more time to avoid getting locked up like it was. And it'll help you throw farther. So that's the rear leg counterweight stuff. Just trying to get the hips to shift behind the heel instead of onto the foot. So then rear leg coil and how that relates to X step. The way you're doing your X step, where your initial step is kind of big, your X step is a little too long and that foot gets turned toes backwards. With this foot turned toe backwards, I've taken my ability to contain energy and momentum in the back side of the throw, and I've turned it away, right? I've thrown all of my potential to generate force out the window that way. You can still throw very well that way. Cole Radalin does that. He turns this, he lets this foot slip out. So he's not really doing anything productive with his rear leg. All your rear leg has to do is carry momentum into the throw. It can also do that in a way that's productive, that gets the weight of the rear leg out of the way. Cole is very young, very athletic, and just throws his weight at his brace. And then his brace is very strong. His front leg is very active, so he makes it work. But it's not ideal for him yet, right? He could throw farther and more consistently if his rear leg coil was better. So let's throw better than Cole, right? That's the idea. So how to coil into this rear leg. So when you're in this standstill position, the rear leg is going to shift backwards without turning. Shift backwards without turning. And the front hip is going to fold down on top of the quad. So what the heck does that mean? So to start, just the left hip going back, stand on one foot, and then imagine you were going to sit down on a chair. That made your hip socket go backwards, right? So that's all you need to do. But then you don't want your right hip to go backwards at the same time. So what you're going to do is you're going to fold into this hip crease. So the right hip is going to go backwards without turning. If it turns, it's going to look like that, right? That is the same thing that your front knee did that got you hurt, right? So we don't want to do it in the front. We don't want to do it in the back. It's safer in the back, but it's still not good. Don't do it. So keeping the hip here, just sending the hip back, and then this hip is going to fold down on top. So that's the folding into this hip crease part. So watch what happens to this foot. If it's neutral, when I fold into the hip crease, the heel is going to go up and my laces are going to turn toe down. That's eversion. It's a fancy science term for your foot is upside down. That correlates with internal rotation of the hip, right? So there's no rotation in this femur. It's just going back. And then this one is internally rotating. And I feel like I'm folding into this hip crease right here. So that's a coil into your rear leg. And you can practice it by shifting onto the front and then shifting into the back, shifting the hip backwards and folding down. So I feel a stretch in my glute medius right here when I do this. So you're kind of going to overdo it when you're practicing it in this standstill static position, right? So shift onto the front, shift onto the rear, shift the hip back, fold the front hip on top, making sure that you're kind of keeping some inward torque with your knee, because that's what you're going to push off of later. So that's it. That's the rear. And then you're basically going to do the same thing on the front. So as you shift forward, as you drive off of the ball of this foot a little bit, it's not a huge move, just a little bit of drive. You're going to shift the weight into the heel, allow the hips to move forward, not towards the foot, but forward. When the heel is down, you're going to let the knee bend a little bit, and then you're going to push into the heel, firing the quad, straightening the knee, and straightening the leg. That is an active brace. That is our moneymaker. This is what makes hip snap happen, and it's what gets our hips moving the way we want to. So what you're doing now in your throw with getting your rear leg to toe back causes you to extend this leg too much, and then you can't get into this driving position with your rear. So you're turning your rear leg into an anchor, which then your body knows the only way to get any power is to force the front open and throw while you're opening that door, essentially. So you're turning your torso into a door that opens this way. So that is a powerful movement, but it's a big and slow, powerful movement. Ideally, we would want a quick and sharp, powerful movement instead of a big and slow one. So what you're doing is you're opening your rear hip to open your front hip. So all the power is coming from your right glute, your left glute and your left leg. We want a little bit of that, but that's pretty passive. That's just this leg going boop and driving you towards the brace. Our real moneymaker is the front leg. So getting this heel down allows you to activate larger muscle groups in, I guess your quad really does most of it. Your glute doesn't really do much. So when you throw this way, there's not really, your front leg isn't really helping a whole lot. But when you can get the heel down, right, we can't squat a lot of weight standing on our tippy toes. This does not work very well with 350 pounds on your shoulders. But once you get your heels down, now you can squat a lot more weight because you're stacking your bones better, right? And you're using larger muscle groups. Ankle stabilizers are very small muscle groups. Calf and, well, bone, not even your calf, bone stacking through your shin and using your quad is a much bigger set of muscles. So that's why we want to get the heel down, and that allows the front hip to clear. People say fire your hips all the time, but your hips aren't really doing a whole lot. Your rear hip is, but your front hip isn't. Your front quad is straightening the leg and clearing the front hip out of the way. So again, your throw is a barn door opening slowly, and what we want is the rear leg sending the rear hip this way, a little bit in front of the plant toes, and then the front leg sends the front hip that way, right, back behind you. So those two forces don't line up, right? If I make those two forces line up, what I get is this, where my hips smash into each other and I just stop. So what I'm doing to turn that drill, which is the can you stop your momentum drill, into an actual throw, is I'm recalibrating the vectors from my rear leg and my front leg, and I'm making them offset just a little bit so they go past each other. So this one is going this way, and this one is going a little bit offset. So what you get, I don't have my medicine ball handy, but the way most beginners throw is their front hip is just static, and the rear hip comes around it, right? So you're rotating, your axis of rotation is here, and everything comes around. It's big and slow. Works great out to 300, 350 feet. Beyond that, it doesn't work. It's also less consistent generally. But when you get your front leg active, which you can't do unless your heel is neutral or at least forward, at least neutral or ideally forward while you're learning, is get the front hip to fire also. So momentum is taking the rear hip forward, and then an active brace, boom, is pulling the front hip rearward. So then you get torque around the center instead of drive only from the backside, right? So hopefully that makes sense. So how do we get there? We get there by making sure we're coiling into the back, and then making sure we're loading the front with the heel forward, and then making sure we're extending the front knee. And you don't have to like full on Drew Gibson this, where he gets to like a dead locked out knee. And you could though, right? Like you're athletic enough, perhaps more so than myself, that your brace looks really good. So I think you could probably get out to 350, 400 pretty easily if you get this figured out. Because your leg is pretty darn straight. But you're stepping onto a straight leg for the most part. I can slow you down a little bit. I cannot, because Zuckerberg took away our ability to slow things down. What a tyrant. So you're extending your front leg as you set it down, and you're setting down mostly on a locked knee. That could also be part of the knee injury issue, is that you're just slamming that front knee pretty hard. So let's look at that for a second. So you're reaching with a bent knee and then straightening as it gets to the ground, and then releasing and it's still pretty straight. So think about, while you're doing your standstill practice, think about getting to this position where both of your knees are bent and you're kind of teetering between being on the front foot and the back foot, right? You're up on the balls of both sets of feet, because then that will allow you to get the heel down and still load, right? So you're not loading, you're just pole vaulting into the ground, which works very well. You're throwing 300 like that, that's great. But to get further, I think you will need to more intelligently load that leg in a way that there's some give to it, and that will allow the quad to load and then unload in a way that makes your hip torque matter more. So the one other thing on that front is there's a slight timing issue, which the way I think about timing is the last thing to change, because everything else is going to change timing. But I just want you to be aware of this conceptually. So we're going to find peak reach back first, right about there. And then we're going to cross-reference that with your front foot. So your front foot is still floating here. So we want this instant of your upper body being at full reach back to happen not when your toe touches on your brace foot, but when your heel actually touches. So let's fast forward to that spot. So there's the early hip opening, and then there your heel's down. So here, when your brace is starting, you're already halfway to center. So you're about a quarter of the way through your pull. So a little bit early on the reach back, right? Some other folks had said that in the comments on your initial post. I'm not worried about it yet. Like, you're obviously throwing very effectively. So don't focus on changing the reach back timing, but just be aware that later is better. So the way to think about this as you're practicing without taking too much mental energy is don't pull the disc through, right? Your goal is to reach back, and keep reaching back forever off the back of the tee pad 20 feet. The only thing that's going to make you stop is that heel getting down and firing the front hip. That's what pulls the slack out of your arm and makes it start going forward, right? So that's the mental cue. Let me take a look at my notes here, see what I missed. I think that's about it. Yeah. So shorter steps in general, from the initial step to the X step to the plant step, all shorter. The reach back extension is a little bit early, not a big deal yet. Your plant foot is open. That is the one thing I would try to fix most. A little bit more on that, and then the foot safety issue of making sure your foot releases. So those are the big things. Your pocket looks great, your balance looks great. Those are the harder things to teach, honestly. So I think you're in good shape. One more little note on how to work on keeping the brace foot closed. So we're starting with this, I was about to say static, but static is not correct. It's a dynamic standstill, because you are shifting your weight and shifting your balance. So start there. When that starts to feel remotely comfortable, you start to get your arm mechanic working on top of that. Honestly, you should be able to get 80 to 90% of your current distance from a standstill pretty easily once you get all your mechanics down. Once you get that, then you can back up to here and add a one step, getting into the same exact position. So there's this other little trick you can use on the way to the one step. So don't just go to the one step with your hips neutral. This is a loop ghost trick. Is he thought about adding this little wind up to your one steps, and all it is that same thing I was doing of just sticking your butt back and then coiling into that hip. But he explains it in a way that's a million times easier, where you just spin this way, but you're not trying to spin this leg, right? You're just trying to send this one forward, which sends this one back. So just that little loop, and that primes your hips to unwind in a way that's productive and make this active brace make more sense. And that gets your hips torquing instead of barn dooring, if that makes sense. So start on the standstills, just dropping the heel and throwing from there, and go to a one step, adding more of the timing in. Once a one step feels good, then you're going to do an absolutely dead slow walk up. That's just literally this slow, balanced, and then throw your one step. So it's really not functionally different from the one step. You're just adding placeholder footwork in the front. Then when that feels good, start adding momentum slowly to where you're cruising through. One last thought on the X step. We don't want the X step to be a 3-beat thing. You don't want to think 1, 2, 3, because then you're going to spend too much time and too much weight on your X step. Think about the X step as a half beat, both in distance and in timing. So it's not 1, 2, 3. It's going to be 1 and 2, right? 1 and 2. So you're floating over the X step. You're not giving it as much space or as much time. It's a little thing that just happens. And then the hard part is getting your hip to load the way you want in that time, right? That's the biggest part of why slowing down is helpful. Okay, so if anyone made it 35 minutes into this, thank you for listening to me babble. And Amber, I hope this is helpful. Please hit me up with any comments or questions or feedback, and I'd be happy to spend more time with you. All right, thanks, Internet. See you next time.